introduce Jenna Brightman, or Jenna Flink from Nurturing Wisdom, and she will begin our discussion tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's awesome to be able to present on this. I think executive functioning, I've been presenting on executive functioning for a while now, and this is an especially important time, I'm sure, as we're all feeling, to be chatting about these things. So yeah, I'm Jenna Flink. I work for Nurturing Wisdom Tutoring, which is a local Chicago tutoring company. We work with a lot of students in the city and in the suburbs. So, have been working here for a while, so kind of know the unique experiences of our Chicago area students here. I originally started my career as a kindergarten and pre-K teacher, so kind of probably the opposite end of the spectrum of some of the students you guys are working with. And a lot of what we work on in kindergarten and pre-K is executive functioning. So that's kind of exclusively what we taught, a lot of those like social skills and things like that. But I think, it's been really awesome to continue to extend that out to some of these older students. So we work with a lot of middle school and high school students with Nurturing Wisdom. And I personally tutor executive functioning with Nurturing Wisdom as well. So we're going to cover tonight a handful of topics that we notice just students in general come to us with these executive functioning needs, these kind of main topics we're going to cover tonight, and then specifically things we've been noticing in the last, 5-6 months of the experience we're living in right now. So just those types of specific things to remote learning, hybrid learning, the new kind of style we're working in right now. So first, we're just going to go into some theory and talk about what executive functioning is, make sure we're all on the same page about those things. Then we're going to go into some practical strategies when it comes to organization, routines, assignment tracking, assignment management, and self-advocacy. And then we'll just talk about how to kind of help your students implement these things. So around mindsets, how to praise, how to set goals, those kinds of things. So we're just going to talk about what executive functioning is to start. Executive functioning is a set of processes that have to do with managing ourselves and our resources in order to achieve a goal. So basically what executive functioning is it's the part of our brain that allows us to access knowledge that we already have, to apply it to something that we're currently doing. So something we're experiencing or thinking about right now, and then being able to actually come up with some sort of product. So an action, spoken idea, written idea, right? So kind of all those steps are happening with these executive functioning skills. One way to think about executive functioning kind of as the goals of executive functioning is output. Students, when they're in school and just us as humans in general, right? We're like putting in a lot of information into our brains. But the executive functioning piece is the part that's actually allowing us to kind of produce information, regurgitate it back out. So those types of things could be, planning a project, completing a project, writing a paper, actually, doing the test taking, studying the information to be able to then put it out into the world. So a great analogy for this is an air traffic controller is our executive functioning skills. So, an air traffic controller being the person that's telling the planes when to land, where to land, how to come in together without hitting each other, right? So that's kind of what executive functioning does for our brains. So it's just a little analogy to understand that a little bit better. This example here on the screen is an example of a previous student that we've worked with. So, this is obviously a very extreme example of a challenge with that output, kind of organizing that information. But we're going to talk about how executive functioning students can be lots of different, students that need support with this can be lots of different types of students. Just kind of some information about what the research says and why executive functioning really does matter. So Adele Diamond, who does some of the leading research on executive functioning strategies and skills, said if you look at what predicts how well children will do later in school, more and more evidence is showing that executive functions actually predict success better than IQ tests. They continue to predict math and reading competence throughout all school years. So these things really are important to how students are doing in school, and that kind of thing. So definitely an important piece of the school puzzle, especially right now, given how different school is. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen and pull up, I want to walk through some different aspects of executive functioning. And so I'm going to show you guys just a document, and I'm actually I'll chat it to you to the group as well. So if anybody wants to pull it up, this will have all the different resources that we're going to talk about this today. So it has a few different things, but the very first page will be the one that we're going to look at first. So if you want to pull it up, you can. You don't have to. Like I said, I'm going to pull it up on my screen as well. So these all, as you guys, if you do pull it up, you'll see that these are kind of the different areas where we find executive functioning, where these skills kind of fall. So, I'll kind of walk through. Some of them are a little bit more straightforward than others, but I'll also just kind of talk through what you might notice about a student that struggles in this area. So physical organization, again, probably pretty straightforward, but how we impose order on our different spaces. So students who struggle with this are going to be the ones that, like in the picture of the binder that was full of different papers, have the disorganized backpacks, struggle with containing their school materials, probably their rooms as well, right? Outside of school, they might lose important papers and assignments. So those are definitely things to look out for in terms of the challenges with the physical organization. The planning piece, so this is a big one, being able to manage time and tasks effectively and efficiently. Students that struggle with this are going to struggle to chunk out larger assignments, so probably rushing to do things at the last minute, or just really find it challenging to know where to start on something. We probably have noticed those types of things before in kids. They probably are going to struggle to turn things in on time, and also spend either too little or too much time on homework, right? So it could be just not putting in that time or spending way too long on homework. Can be both those things. Focusing, so kind of going along with that time management piece, right? Being able to prioritize and know what is and isn't important on when to do things. Students who struggle with this, are going to find it challenging to stay focused during work or homework, act a little bit more impulsively, that kind of thing. The study skills, being able to take in the information and then output it on the test. Students who struggle with this are going to just not study again. So that's that challenge of just not putting the time in or not know what to study, right? I know I've worked with students who are studying the wrong things or studying way too much or not studying enough, missing things, spend too long studying, have disorganized notes that don't flow as logically, right? So these are just good indicators to be able to notice these things in students for what they need support with. That self-regulation piece, that's probably one that we're seeing more right now, just the challenges of being a little bit more independent with the remote learning or the hybrid models that we're working in right now. So, being able to evaluate needs, those transitions can be challenging, the self-advocacy piece. Students that struggle with this are going to have a hard time changing their minds or shifting mid-course, kind of course correcting, making sure that they're reflecting on how a process is going and making shifts if they need to. And they probably aren't going to be asking for help as much. So watching out for that. The writing skills, writing isn't always thought of as an executive functioning skill, but it definitely is one. It's like, output, just like we were talking about before. So, that's just the ability to express ideas logically. So, students that struggle with this, they might be all over the place in terms of their writing, have a hard time organizing their thoughts. These students might have really good ideas, right? Again, this is a type of student that I've seen a lot is, they have those ideas, but they have a hard time organizing them logically into a paper. They have a hard time telling a story in a cohesive order. Again, that one maybe is a little bit more obvious one in terms of being able to recognize, but just a good thing to watch out for, that those are generally linked with those executive functioning skills. And then the last piece is working memory. So working memory is where a lot of these functions happen in our brains as it is. It allows us to temporarily store new information and use that new information in expressing what we're working with, and also pull from, our kind of long-term memory. So this is one that basically our whole goal of these strategies we're going to talk about is how to decrease all the clutter in the working memory, decrease having to think about what we're doing first, next, last, having these routines, organizing ourselves so that we can actually focus on the task at hand with our working memory. So, students that struggle with this, it's hard to keep track of more than one thing at once. It's hard to listen and take notes at the same time, things like that. A good way to think about this working memory is an example, like for a math problem. Students are using their working memory a lot doing something like that, right? So they read the question, they're then using their working memory to kind of pull from that long-term memory to decide what strategy or skill do they have to use for that math problem. Then they're actually trying to comprehend the math problem itself. They're trying to then, as they're actually doing the problem, they're trying to think about, how does my teacher want me to write the process out? How do I show my work? Those kinds of things. So that's all happening in your working memory. So again, what we're trying to do is create space to actually do the math problem and not be thinking about all these other organizational tasks, building these routines, that kind of thing, to help create more space to do those things. Like we said at the beginning, feel free to jump in. I'm going to be sharing a lot of information with you guys. So feel free, if you have any questions, definitely jump in as we keep going through. So I'm going to hop back to the PowerPoint. I'll let you guys know if you do have the PDF pulled up. I'll let you guys know as we are chatting through some of those different documents and resources that we were looking at there. So we just talked about all these different things. That last piece is definitely an important piece too, that work smarter, not harder, right? All these things are meant to help us become more efficient with our work. So like I said earlier, just going to talk about some different types of students that are really going to be helped, especially with these types of skills. So students that just have more challenges with working memory. Especially when it's in comparison to their other cognitive skills in verbal math processing speed, right? So that this is can be a little bit more of a challenge for them because of less space in that working memory to kind of manipulate these different things that they're trying to work through. Students with ADHD, probably not a surprise that the executive functioning challenges can go hand in hand with that as well. So just, again, these strategies that we're going to talk about are super helpful for those types of students. And then gifted children as well. So not all gifted children struggle with executive functioning, but gifted children can be more likely to, just because they are finding some of those other parts of school a little bit easier. So they are able to rely more on their memory and skills in those areas and don't have to rely as much on their ability to manage their time. Things become a little bit easier for them. So sometimes, if they do have a transition into some harder classes or things like that, and these skills haven't been built up, that can be a little bit of a challenge. And then really, I think everybody can benefit from these strategies. I'm hoping that even us adults here tonight are going to find some things that are helpful for us. I know that these strategies have been helpful for me just teaching these things. So, you know, these are great to implement with all different types of kids. Especially helpful to work with students that are in transition. So, you know, in typical years, we generally are looking at that transition to middle school, that transition to high school. These can be times where, you know, if students don't have some of these stronger skills, things get harder. That can be a hard time, hard transition. Pretty much everybody is in a transition right now doing new things. So I think everybody can benefit from this right now. So I'm glad we're doing this. So like I said, we're gonna dive into the practical strategies next. So anybody have any questions so far before we dive into the practical strategies, just about what executive functioning is or anything like that? Cool, perfect. I'll keep going. Again, feel free to interrupt me if you do have any questions. So we're going to talk about physical organization first. So basically, physical organization is just being able to access the materials you need when you need them. Definitely seen kids waste time just trying to gather up everything they need to get their work done, and then they're even more worn out when they actually get started on their work. So just having a home for everything, and we'll talk about the different types of homes that we can create is super important, so that, again, that's not something we're thinking about. We're not thinking about where our pencil is. We're actually able to do the math work or whatever it is. So the first piece of this we're going to talk about is building a study space. So we talk about this, you know, in terms of a homework space a lot, you know, in previous years of working with executive functioning students. I think this is especially important right now. Students are doing a lot of work at home. So creating that study space that has their materials in it is going to be especially important. Again, spending less time and energy gathering those things that they need to do their work. So these are just some principles to be thinking about when creating that study space. The first thing is just that it's a relatively quiet part of the house. I know that might be hard right now with a lot of people home, but trying to just create that relatively quiet space as much as possible, and then free of distractions too. That could be lots of different things for different students, you know, depending on where they're at, if it's like games and toys, or if it's, you know, their phone, whatever that looks like for them, the free of distractions part. This third one is a little counterintuitive to those first two, that idea of it not being too isolating. The idea behind this is that it's great if, you know, a parent can walk by, or, you know, whoever, an adult that's home, can walk by from time to time. If students are totally isolated in a different part of the house, it's so easy to not be doing the things that you should be doing, right? Just like too tempting to not get work done. So it's great if somebody can walk by from time to time, but it's still that quiet, distraction-free place. And then that last piece, definitely more about materials. So has a desk or a table, and has the necessary supplies, you know, whatever they need, you know, obviously some sort of computer or tablet device, if they need pens, pencils, their notebooks, calculator, kind of having that all have a space in that study space. And then I think that desk or table is a little more intuitive now that we're doing some of the remote learning. But just, you know, I know definitely some students who like to do their homework on the bed or things like that, trying to avoid that, just because obviously there's a bit of a distraction there in terms of going to sleep or feeling a little bit more relaxed. So just having that kind of hard surface to be working on as well. The other piece that we're going to talk about, actually, before we talk about the binder system, is just to kind of have some expectations around the study space as well. You know, teachers at school provide a lot of expectations, of course, you know, as we do at home too, but in terms of, you know, what the classroom expectations of the classroom are as students are working, right? So kind of helping students to transfer that to their home too. You know, should their phone be away? Should they have a separate space to relax than their study space? If students are doing the hybrid learning, right? Should they have, do they come home and put all their materials right in their designated study space right away? So kind of setting up those expectations and you know, rules around the study space too, just so students kind of know what the expectations are. Talk briefly about physical organization of materials. I don't know how, you know, everybody I think is probably in a slightly different boat in terms of how many actual paper materials they have this school year. I know a lot more things are online, but just to kind of give a brief overview of, you know, if they do have some papers, or once we go back to in-person learning, kind of what this binder system can look like. This is great too. Again, our whole principle around physical organization is just having everything has a place. And so we like the binder system just because everything is in one place. We recommend one binder if possible, maybe two if somebody has a lot of paper materials. But again, just keeping everything in that one spot so it's not shoved in the backpack or the desk or the locker, or whatever it may be. I think this is going to be important for students that are doing more of a hybrid model too, because they are probably going to be bringing things back and forth from school. So like I said, everything in one place, things are harder to lose. The way we kind of set up our binder is we like those, the binder dividers with pockets, as you probably saw in that previous picture. So actually nothing's going in the 3 rings besides these binder dividers. All the papers are actually just going in the pockets, which is nice because things don't fall out. I know I've worked with many students where it's hard to keep those 3 ring papers from falling out or ripping out at certain times, so nothing falls out. It's really easy to kind of sift through those different folders. You can have a bunch of them. I'll talk through kind of what our recommendations are there. So it's really easy to find things on here. So again, I'll just go through this briefly just because I know this won't be quite as important this school year, but basically the way we recommend this binder is the front of the binder can be that assignment notebook or assignment sheet, whatever they're using to track their assignments, that actually goes in that very front pocket of the binder. And then those binder dividers, like I said, are going to be the rest of the binder. So the first binder pocket can be any homework that's due that day. So anything they're turning in that day that they need to, you know, have easy access to. And then basically one pocket, maybe 2 pockets if they again, I don't think we have a lot of paper this year at least, so not a lot to worry about there, but 1 pocket per class. So, you know, kind of getting that designated area per class. And then that last pocket being full of loose leaf. That way they're never trying to, you know, rip something out of a notebook or something. If they do have to take a quick note, turn something in, the teacher asks them to, you know, do a quick assignment on a loose leaf paper. Again, just having a place for everything. So that's our basic recommendation in terms of how to set that binder up. Again, I don't think this is going to be as important, but it just is super important to keep that binder cleaned out. So trying to clean out old materials or things that students don't need anymore fairly regularly so that they are able to keep their information to just one binder and actually find the things they need. I'm not going to go into that one in as much detail again. Like I said, I think not quite as important this year. So this one might be a little bit more important in terms of our materials. So the different documents and things on devices. So I have worked with, I would say most of my students that I've worked with are saving things maybe to their downloads, or more so now to, Google Drive or things like that, and not a lot of actual organization around those. It's just kind of in their drive. So the basic organization of the binder that we talked about is what we would recommend for folders as well, and definitely encouraging students to create these folders so that they're able to find things more easily. They're not just searching every time they try to find something, and they, again, for tests and finals and things like that, it's super helpful to have easy access to those, know what unit certain things went to. So basically creating a folder for each class. Awesome to create folders within folders for chapters, activities, units, that kind of thing, certain notes, that again, being able to quickly access things without having to just dig around that drive. So that's a great thing to encourage for students. So those are kind of our overarching physical organization materials, strategies that we would recommend. Anybody have any questions about any of those pieces?
I have a quick question. How frequently do you recommend that we clean out folders or, go through the devices and make sure that things are organized?
Totally. So I think for, it's a great thing to just do a quick spot check, maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks. I think it's easy for things to get a little bit mixed up, especially if that's just something that the kid can get in the habit of. That's a great thing to do. Or if, the parent can kind of spot check that as well, a little bit more regularly. So that's great. I think a full clean out, obviously in our devices, we don't necessarily need to clean things out, but if we're talking about a binder, I'd say a full clean out, definitely at least once a quarter, where you're really thinking about like what needs to, what's going to stay and what's going to go.
And then Christina wants to know if you have any tips for organizing an inbox.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, they're getting a lot of emails
every day.
So, yeah, I would imagine that. I know the email situation is more than they're used to probably, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about self-advocacy over email too. My recommendation is doing the same thing. You can set up different labels, especially for like Gmail. I'm sure you can do it for most email, though I know a lot of schools use like some sort of Gmail platform too. So kind of the same way as setting those labels up as, here are all my emails from my chemistry teacher. Here are all my emails from my art class, whatever it is. And then they can just, drag those out of their inbox and into those labels. So I think just anytime you can create folders or labels for things is a great way to do it. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's more, we're all used to all those emails, right? And that us people in the workforce. So it's great that they're getting used to these things, but it is more, yeah, for sure.
It is something that they're having to get used to for sure.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I think anytime you can create, labels or spaces for things, drag them out so that they're not all jumbled in one place. That's a, great overarching concept. Any other questions? Perfect. Okay, so we are going to dive into my favorite, which is routines, next. And we're going to talk about a few different, the documents that I sent in that link are going to be mostly around how to build routines and checklists and things like different resources that you can use for those. So probably a lot of us already kind of know how great routines are, but routines are, we crave routines, right? Us as humans, kind of from the time we're born, we crave structure, especially important this year as things are different from previous years. We're having to create new routines, right? So what's really great about routines is it helps us run on autopilot, right? We don't have to think about what are we doing first, next, last. Again, that's creating space in our brains to actually focus on the actual work we're doing. I think it does give us a perceived sense of control. Again, so important this year to have that. Students know what to expect and what's going to happen. So as much of that as we can create in some of this uncertainty is great, and the changing environment too. It also encourages ownership. So, just helping to students to feel like they kind of have control over what they are doing first, next, and last. We're going to talk about how to give students the chance to build their own routines within reason. And then I think there's definitely benefits for parents too, right? The idea is that the routine is the law of the land, is the boss, the checklist is the boss rather than parents. So kind of helping with that power struggle as well. So one great resource that we love to use when helping students to build homework routines, and this we can talk about how this is definitely can be helpful for both homework, and we'll talk about some resources for remote learning as well. But this would be kind of more of their independent work time, so outside of school time. So whether that is more of the asynchronous type of learning or the actual homework. The process that we're going to use to do this is called the time study, or it's like a worksheet that we're going to use. It's that second, I think it's pages 2, 3, and 4 of that document I sent. And basically the goal is to create something like what you're seeing right now on the screen, a schedule for homework. So the idea is that it's really not meant to be a strict, this is what time you do this and when, right? Like exactly 30 minutes you're going to do your social studies homework. That's not really what the goal is. The goal is to create an order that students do things in, so that they know what they're doing right away and they're avoiding any of that procrastination, right? I'm sure we've all done this, where you like have a bunch of different things to do and you don't really have a plan of what to do first. So you spend the first 15 minutes of work just figuring out, like thinking about and putting off and hemming and hawing about what we actually need to do first, right? I'm sure we've done it. I know students do it too. So that's what's nice about creating a routine and an order around work, is that there isn't a, what am I going to do first, next, last? It's every day when I start my work, I do social studies homework first. So that's helpful, and also helps students to chunk things out as well. So, especially right now, early evening and after dinner may not be the only time they have. They might have a pretty big chunk of study hall during the day, or they might have different points during the day where they're able to do more of their work. So really finding those pockets of time and creating routines around those things. And then the other piece that we strongly encourage students to do when building this routine is building in regular daily studying for 1 to 3 of their hardest classes. So this is not just studying that they do right before a test. This is regular studying that they're doing pretty much every day, to be able to chunk out their studying and do a little bit at a time, better kind of put it into that long-term memory, and avoid that cramming right before a test. So that's another thing that we encourage students to do when building this routine through this kind of time study process. For example, the sample schedule that you're seeing, and like I said, I'll kind of show you guys how you would use that worksheet to build it. This student chose to study math and study science for 5 minutes a day. So that's something they're doing every single day. The other thing that's really nice about building this routine is that it helps students to build in work for all of their classes, even when they don't have something due maybe the next day. So this is great just in general for something like block scheduling, but I think especially helpful now. I've noticed with a lot of my students, even more so than previous years, teachers, because they're able to post things very easily, they're posting things in advance. So students are given a few days to get these things done, but they're not always using those couple of days, right? So if they have this routine where every day they do something for social studies, that's a great thing to be able to help them chunk out their work. So they're doing a little bit of social studies every day. So just to walk through briefly how to work through this worksheet, the very first page, the idea is to just figure out what do you typically have to do in your classes. So, you know, kind of having the student walk through the different classes that they have, the typical activities they have that does not need to be perfect. What do they just generally have? Do they have to read for 30 minutes? Do they usually get about 20 questions in math, whatever it is? About how long they feel like it should take them, maybe not necessarily how long it actually does, but how long it should take them. And then this is their chance to pick those 2 to 3 classes that there are 1 to 3 classes that they're going to study regularly in. So these are the things that we kind of have to fit into our day in terms of when we're getting these chunks of work done. And then the next page, it just kind of has students think about what other activities do you generally do. Again, we're not creating a full schedule, but we just want them thinking about like, okay, you usually have an activity right after school between 3:30 and 5, you know, so your time should be more later in the afternoon or any times during the day you have, right? So just kind of thinking about those. Pockets of time, again, this is a chance to think about those pockets of time. Maybe because there's not as much commuting happening, somebody has a little bit more time before school. They don't mind waking up a little bit earlier. So that's a great chunk of time. Maybe they don't love waking up early and that's a great chance for them to sleep in. That's fine too. That's not a chunk that they need to have. So just kind of thinking about those chunks of time to build in, and then actually building that goal schedule, right? So this person wants to study Spanish at the very beginning of the day, and then that schedule that we were looking at before. So just a great way to kind of, again, chunk out, build that routine, structure that order. One thing just to note about schedules right now is students may need to do multiple time studies. Maybe they have days that they're in school and days that they're out of school. Maybe they have a block schedule, A and B days, whether they're in school or out of school, right? So maybe they do separate time studies for different days because they want to structure their day a little bit differently. Maybe they have study hall one day and not the other day. So that's totally fine to do. I mean, I wouldn't do 5 for 5 days a week, but if there's 2 separate ones that make sense, that definitely makes sense. So we just kind of a few other things. This is going to be your next option. Sorry, I can definitely answer that question, Christina. So yeah, do we encourage short breaks between subjects? So yeah, I think every student is different. We'll talk a little bit about breaks as well. But you know, if a student needs to take a 5-minute break after, you know, every 25 minutes of work, I think that's absolutely a great thing to do. I would say at least, you know, chunking out. That's why we like that, like before dinner and after dinner, even if they're not eating dinner during that time, kind of looking at those chunks of time rather than just my 4 hours after school time that I'm doing. So absolutely, I think especially when students are working on Zoom so much right now, doing those smaller breaks more throughout the day is going to be really helpful. And I think too, like I said, we'll talk about this, but kind of talking to students about what they can be doing on the break is an awesome thing as well, because I think that's hard. I think it's easy to just like get distracted by something else on the computer versus, you know, going on the walk or things like that. So I think small breaks throughout the day right now are very important. Absolutely. Thank you for that question. This next document here is the next document on that PDF link that I sent you guys. So this, again, just these pieces that are important to be able to know actually have a routine and a schedule. So, you know, this again is just a small resource of how to actually help students manage their routine. So kind of building in that class name and time so that they know what class they're at and when, especially for these remote classes, where they're actually meeting, the learning platform or the link for it. how homework is turned in. I have students who are turning things in 3 different places because sometimes it has to be a Google Doc uploaded. Sometimes it has to be a picture, because it's like their math work or something for art. So just making sure that they know where to turn it in again, so they don't have to think about it. And then, just any notes that would be helpful in terms of that. So just, again, anything that we can do to help build those routines around what to do and when. Is going to be really helpful right now. And then now that we kind of have a structure and a routine, we have to know what we're actually doing during those chunks of time, right? So this is where the assignment tracking comes in. So the most important principle of assignment management is that we have to do it, right? We have to have some way of keeping track of our assignments. I have a lot of students who, now that we have these awesome online platforms, are almost exclusively using those to keep track of their assignments, but it's not always foolproof, right? It doesn't allow them to chunk things out over multiple days. It doesn't always allow them to click, when it's finished, things like that, where it's super helpful to still be tracking these things on their own, even though it's so nice that it's all posted. There's no forgetting, but there is, these systems of actually tracking our assignments is going to be important still. So the kind of overarching principles, and then we'll talk about some options for tracking our assignments. So writing all their classes down, assignments for each of them, or none if there's no homework. So that none is super important, because otherwise it might just be, did I not write it down? And they're going back and checking, right? 3 different times because they're not sure, did I just not write it down, or do I really have no homework, right? Check off completed assignments. I think our brains just love checking things off, first of all. So that's super helpful, getting to check something off a to-do list. And then also just knowing that's out of my brain now, I did it, right? Hit that submit button, whatever it is, making sure that they have the process for that. And then writing down tests, quizzes, and projects. I think this one is especially important, the tests and quizzes piece. I know a lot of the online platforms, teachers don't necessarily post when tests are, they're posting the assignments. And so that does require listening to the teacher on Zoom or in class, whatever it may be, to know when those tests are. So that has to be written down somewhere. They can use their assignment management system to chunk out planned projects and studying. And then making sure they have a place for this notebook. That might be a physical place in their study space at home, or it might be online. That's totally fine too. There's definitely good options for both. Just a few different, there's so many different ways of creating to-do lists and tracking assignments, but just going to talk about, I guess, one really assignment notebook. That one's a little bit more, we're a little more familiar with that, some sort of physical planner. The other thing is these assignment sheets, which we're going to talk about. There is one example in that packet of PDFs that I linked to for you guys. And I'll show you a couple of other examples too. These assignment sheets are nice for a few different reasons. One is if, again, not as much moving around these days as going from class to class before, but if students are prone to losing something like a planner, this is a great option. I also like it, especially right now, because you can do it in a Google Doc and students are on their computer anyway for all of their classes. So just pull up it up in a Google Doc, type in your assignment. If it's physical or electronic, that's totally fine. So basically, these are just customizable sheets that you can create weekly for whatever the actual classes that you're taking are. So, this one has the class lists. You can put in the assignments. You can check off when you're done. The book part may not be as important right now, but did you remember to bring your book home? Again, probably not as an important piece right now, but definitely that assignment. Something instead on that side could go, did I hit submit? Where do I submit my assignment, right? Any notes about that is great. Again, just some more options This one I love because it has students actually picking what they're going to study for. So, this student, they must have decided that chemistry, English, and Italian would be the subjects that they're studying for every day for those 5 minutes. So in this assignment sheet, we're actually putting what we're studying. I'm going to study my Italian verb flashcards, whatever it may be. So that, again, these are just so many different ways of setting these up, but that's what's so nice about these is they're super customizable. This one, just another way to, look at it here. So again, a customizable way to have an assignment tracking system for students, and especially if students don't love handwriting as much, again, typing those if they would prefer to do it that way is great. Ultimately, this assignment management piece is so important just because no matter how good students are at taking in information, if they don't know what needs to get done, they're in trouble, right? I think we've probably all seen this a time or two. So, now that we have that structure and that routine, just knowing exactly, when to do things and how to turn them in and, how to check them out, all of that good stuff is super important. And I think this year is especially hard because students are not only having to keep track of what they're doing for homework, they're often also having to keep track of what they have to turn in for classwork as well. So, unlike normal, when we're in person, they just hand something in at the end of class. That's different this year, right? A lot of times those things are being submitted as well. So definitely, again, keeping track of these assignments is just more complicated because there's more to keep track of. And again, this is just, super important to have students still writing things down, chunking things out, using this in conjunction with the school platform that they have. And again, there's an example in that PDF, and I can also send you guys Google Doc versions of those as well if anybody wants to use those to customize too. Just a quick note on chunking out and planning out projects. I just wanted to show you that project planning document that is also in that resource packet that I sent you guys. So this is just a great way to chunk out larger assignments or studying. You could do this for studying as well, even though it's a project planning sheet. So, thinking about when you're setting those mini deadlines for yourself and then thinking about those tasks. So really the biggest thing for the tasks is having students think about what are the really, really small, breaking things down into as small pieces as possible. Like I said, I think this year assignments are being posted further out in advance. So even if it's not a large assignment, you can think through the same things the same way. Even if it's 3 steps, we can set those deadlines for ourselves on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so that we're doing a little bit each day. So, students could use this project planning sheet for that, or they could just do it directly in their assignment sheet, assign themselves, have 60 questions and math to do by Wednesday. I'm going to do, assign myself 1 through 20 tonight, put that in my assignment sheet, 21 through 40 on Tuesday, whatever it may be. So just helping for that chunking out process. This is another just resource that can be used kind of as an assignment sheet and a schedule. So, if students need a little bit more of a schedule for their day, especially for those remote learning days that maybe are a little less structured, less time with a teacher on Zoom, this is a great a great resource to use at, again, maybe not in place of an assignment sheet, but in conjunction with, right, actually putting those assignments and those to-do lists in here. I think it says it on here too, but this is a great way to schedule breaks for students too. So, if they have certain things they want to get done in the morning and then take a break, they could be much more than just the break. For lunch, you could schedule in those small breaks using something like this too. So again, those days that are maybe a little less structured, this could be a great scheduling resource for that, just to help, build in those different chunks of time, and especially those breaks. And I know I promised that I would talk about breaks, so that's our next slide here. So I think the biggest thing is making sure students take breaks, know when to take breaks, and know how long to take breaks for, right? So definitely an appropriate amount of time and at appropriate times, right? So we don't want students taking a break for a big chunk of time in the middle of the day when things are due for classwork or things like that, right? So we want to help them chunk out those breaks and take smaller breaks throughout the day, so that they don't need, that big time in the middle of the day that maybe is not at an appropriate time to take that break. Timers are great for this. So setting timers both for like chunks of time to work and chunks of time to take that break is always a great thing to do. The Pomodoro method is a good one. It's basically 25 minutes and then 5 minutes, 25 minutes of work time, 5 minutes of break time, kind of do that 4 times and then take a longer break. So that's kind of a good structure for a lot of, especially older students. Younger students would probably need shorter periods of time. And then having options of what students can do during breaks. I think this is tough, especially because we're on our computers, right? So we definitely want students to be doing things other than being on their computer. We had a teacher tell us about how in her classroom she implemented, she would have popsicle sticks that had different activities on them. Take some deep breaths, go on a 5-minute walk, read a book, things like that. So that could be a great thing to use at home, is just having those options for what are some things that I could do during my break. That would be a little bit more of that mindful break, right? This is an extra stressful time. We're dealing with a lot of different things that we're not used to. So anything where where students can be a little more mindful during those breaks, again, those deep breaths, going on a walk, doing an activity, an outdoor activity, those are great things to just give them those choices for. Any questions about the breaks? And just because procrastination, I think, is a challenge for all of us, I love to just give a few tips on procrastination. So a few things that are good to be thinking about when we're trying to combat procrastination is, one is prepare. So have these routines, all the things that we've already been talking about. Prepare for what you need to do, know what you need to do, and have a plan for doing it. That's kind of goes along with these strong habits, right? Have a routine for yourself. So everything that we just talked about in terms of structuring those routines are a great way to combat procrastination. Another just little, very practical, tangible tip is the 5-second rule. So basically, as soon as we think of something that we need to do, that we should do, we have to act on it within 5 seconds to really keep up that motivation. So if I decide I should work out tonight, I really should do something within those first 5 seconds to get me towards that goal. So that doesn't necessarily mean leave, run out the door and go to the gym right then, but that might mean I text a friend and say, hey, do you want to go work out later? Or I write in my calendar, like work out from 6 to 7, or I pack my gym bag, right? So lots of different things that could look like, so just kind of encouraging students to take that action. If they think, oh, I should study for a test tonight, what they can do in those first 5 seconds to kind of help keep that motivation up. All right. And then kind of last practical strategy for everybody is this idea of self-advocacy. So I think that this is just especially hard this year. So we students are meeting teachers for the first time online, right? Especially students that are in new schools. It's definitely harder to engage and participate online than it is in person for a lot of students. I think that this is just more challenging to have the self-advocacy. So just a couple of kind of tips to think through when it comes to this. So in terms of how to self-advocate. So I think helping students to become comfortable with email is great. You know, making sure that they know how to message or email teachers or even peers, being able to message peers to figure out if they have questions or things like that. I think, you know, especially just learning how to email appropriately, obviously, with an address and complete sentences. I know a lot of times teachers expect certain things in terms of what they're hearing from students, so helping to make sure they know those expectations. It's always great to just have, you know, make sure students know what they're requesting and have a specific request, have a specific question, you know, rather than just like, I need help, but what do you need help with? Is there something you're specifically asking in terms of your grade, or, you know, an assignment that you're not sure of, something like that is always great. It's super helpful, I think, for some students to mock these things out. So to actually practice this, you could even practice it via Zoom with somebody in the other room or a family member or something like that. So, you know, practicing what it looks like to ask those questions, making sure they're comfortable with the different platforms. I know they're probably way more comfortable than us, but, but just making sure they're comfortable, especially working with adults and peers there. And then also just knowing those expectations for in-class participation when it comes to these remote learning classes. So, you know, does the teacher, I think it's a lot easier to just kind of stay in the background when it's something online. So is the teacher expecting them to raise their hand or answer questions a few times throughout the class, and having reminders for that if they need to, or things like that. So just knowing what those expectations are for these remote learning, you know, participating in this remote learning environment. Any questions about self-advocacy or any other thoughts there?
I was going to say,
Yeah.
My daughter's a junior, so she's on the older end of the spectrum of the kids that we're talking about. But the hardest thing for her with the remote learning has been not being in the physical classroom with the teacher, where you can kind of linger after class and ask your question, and
Yep.
have to, like, be very cognizant of, like, you have to send an email to your teacher to ask even the smallest questions. And that has been the hardest thing, I think, for her to come to grips with and figure out how to do it and feel comfortable doing it.
Totally. No, I think that having that structure and that routine around it, right, is super helpful. And yeah, it's totally different and new. You can't just run in and ask them a question super easily. It does feel a little bit, I think, more, it's obviously a little bit, maybe feels like a little bit more work, but also is a little bit less comfortable, I think, too, because you're not getting that face-to-face experience with the teacher in that way. So yeah, no, I can definitely see how that would be a challenge for sure. Yeah, any other thoughts or ideas around that self-advocacy piece? Or any? Perfect. Well, I know we're getting low on time here, but I just want to walk through I always like to remind people that there is really just no quick fix for executive functioning. These are long-term strategies. I mean, habit building. I think we all as adults know that it's hard to build habits. So just, you know, remembering that these things take time, and especially under the circumstances we're in, we're all getting used to a lot of new things all at once. So, you know, allowing those, you know, the building of these habits over time, and kind of working with kids to do things very small and incrementally. So just like a quick way that we teach these skills, again, just as a parting thought, is that, you know, these things are, I think, sometimes seem like they should come really naturally, but they don't always, right? These are really things that have to be taught. And so, really modeling these things for kids and showing them this is how we put our materials in our study space. This is how we kind of work through our routine. This is how you go through your e-learning platform and look at all the different assignments you have and put them on your assignment notebook, right? That's what I've been doing with all of my students right now, is just really showing them how to chunk out their assignments, right? So doing those things together, or showing them those things first, obviously, then doing them together for a while, potentially, to be able to build that independence, and setting goals around that, right? Like, what are the expectations in terms of, you know, what they're working on, and how they're going to get to chunking those things out or building that routine. It could be something as small as, like, I will wake up and look at my assignments every morning, right? Just starting with something basic like that, and then working up to writing them down. So definitely remembering that these things take time. You know, I always like to think of executive functioning as, or these habit building, just as sometimes it is a little bit 2 steps forwards, 1 step backwards, and we're always reflecting and thinking about how we can shift and change as we, as students, you know, routines and schedules are changing, how those things need to shift. Any questions about that last piece of things, or anything that we talked about? Perfect. Good. Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Susan, I don't know if you had anything that you guys wanted to wrap up with. I can also chat my contact information if anybody has any questions or wants to reach out to me about anything in particular that we chatted about as well.
Well, thank you so much, Jenna. That's, you know, it's so important this year to think about these things. And I appreciate you giving us these wonderful tools to work with. If anybody would like a link to the presentation, just email me. I think you got an email from me earlier with the Zoom link. Just respond back and I can send you a link to the video of the presentation, and also the materials that Jenna have provided to us. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to chat, my contact information. So feel free to take it down. If anybody wants to reach out, you're welcome to.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And everybody have a great evening. And I hope that just a second.